There are so many ideas in this book. How are we going to actually learn them? How are we going to make them a part of us? What are your thoughts? Go ahead and type exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom. If you would like to share, it doesn't have to be a definitive answer, just your answer about how do you expect to do that. I asked CJ, and I will not. I'll describe that later on. But the thing is that the Greater Philadelphia Society has been at it for some time. But let's not talk about, let's look at your individual way of what you are planning to do in order to understand this book. So we're going to start with Evanique, Charlie, Joe, Maritza, and David. Evanique.
Yeah, so I mean, what I plan to do is take what applies to me and apply it to my life and what I want to do. But I also want to use it as a way to design my life or create the life that I want. I think there's so many tools about it, and this is my first time reading the book, so it'll be very interesting to see. But it's kind of, for me, it'll be like a take what works for me in my life and my work life, and then leave the rest for the next time I read it, and maybe something different will come for me, because I think the book as a whole is applicable to how you're going to use it in your situation. And I think that's going to be different for each person. So if something speaks to you, act on it.
Wonderful. Excellent. So folks, what we're going to do is that all the other questions are about design in a complex system. So I want to take the time to actually answer this question as best as we can, because that's going to help us throughout. All the questions both Joe and I have kept track of, and we are going to put them up on the meetup page, all the other questions. So let's focus on this question, because this is the heart of it. We are at the beginning of the book. We are looking at the prelude, which is the overview of the book. How are we going to study it? So next up is going to be Charlie, Joe, David, Charlie, Joe, Maritza, David, Laura, Mike, Ambika, and the other Mike. So let's start with Charlie. Charlie, how are you planning to learn this book?
Well, I've already said that at the very beginning, but for me, this is very complicated stuff. And so I have to make it real. So I have a couple of projects. One is fairly simple, and one is a wicked problem about journalism, new form of it. And so actually working on something to see how I can apply these ideas to something concrete, something real, but something that is very complicated and a wicked problem, so to speak.
Excellent. That's a fantastic idea. Choose a wicked problem to work on. Or maybe you choose a whole range of problems to work on. Some simple, some hard, and see whether you're getting any traction from using the ideas, and if not, figure out, talk to other people and go from there. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Maritza. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, the way I plan to explore this book may take a little bit more time than the way we're approaching it. So, I mean, I'll be going through it with everyone. But I think the most important thing is to kind of start to redraw some of the graphics that are actually in the book, applying it to a problem that you're dealing with. And it may not, match. Essentially, you take the terminology. You have to understand the terminology that the graphic is actually communicating to you, and then try to apply that to a problem, and even possibly redesign the graphic yourself. Because I think there's something in that process where you're actually making it your own, and you may come up with a similar graphic to the authors did, and that's fine. But I think going through the process of actually drawing something out with the understanding of the terminology and what each one of those components means actually is incredibly helpful. I mean, it'll be a lot of failure in that process, but I think that that's how you really get the most out of the book, is they've given you a really good start as to how to think about these things, how to look at these things, but you got to make them your own a little bit. And that's where the work comes in.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joe. I'm going to summarize not summarize, but I'm going to talk about what I got from what everybody's saying, hopefully as a way of kind of doubling down on at least some of the issues. What people are saying is far more richer than what I can capture, but I'm going to capture some aspects. So what Charlie has said is that work on specific problems. What Joe is saying is that take the graphics and make your own version of it. I want to say that one of my favorite phrases in this chapter was to say that there is a distinction, kind of the graphics are there because you're moving from the acquisitive eye to reflective eye. I think that's just amazing, because and that's what visual pictures do. And making your own graphics, using this as a base, using the given graphics as a base, is a great way of integrating things firsthand yourself. So a great point. Evanik, I apologize, but I was not trying to summarize what you said. Can you summarize what you said?
Sure. So basic summaries, I'm going to read the book and I'm going to take the things that work that's going to help me design the life that I want and help me to figure out what that is too. And take what applies and apply it, and then save the rest for the next read.
Got it. Excellent. So design your life and apply what you can. Excellent. All right. Next up is going to be Maritza.
I would say almost that it's a matter of changing your perspectives, maybe cheat a little bit. Take the authors on faith. When they tell you at the very beginning of the book that you're already a designer, believe them. Don't focus on the fact that there are a lot of things that you have to study methodically, and there's a lot of graphs you have to dissect and retrace. You already now, after today, you know the most important thing you need to know about this book, that everything you touch, you're designing, you're helping to design, you're a part of the design. So if you move forward with that foremost in your mind, every little thing that you have the time to view in this book is just a component. It's a little piece that's going to help you create your own symphony. So just view it that way. You are gathering little pieces, little nuggets of knowledge whenever you can, at whatever speed you can. And it doesn't matter how little or how much, it's all going to be helpful in creating that composition that is your life.
Wonderful. The thing I got most from what you said, lots of great points, but the thing I got most is that you have to believe that you're a designer, that your basic confidence in yourself, saying that I will design as best as I can. And having that gets you started, because you start integrating as best as you can. Excellent point. Next up is David, Laura, Mike, Ambika, and Mike. So it's going to be David. David, what are you going to do with this book? How are you going to master it?
Well, I'm going to do what Maritza said. I'm going to dive in fully, believing from the beginning that I'm a designer. My goal is to fully believe everything we can see that is in there, whether the authors put it in, to fully believe it. But I think, as Joe said, it's a big effort. So my approach to doing this sort of finding all the pieces and making an integration of it, like Christian wants us to have it all put together. I look for all the things I can see, everything that I already agree, fine. I look for the things that are wrong that I hear in the book. What is wrong? What sticks out as I cannot believe, and get a handle on that. And that's what I focus on. And I work until I can find an example in a project or in a thought that makes it right, the right point of view for something. It has to solve something. These guys believed it. And I would say it exactly the way they said it. Then I know I've sort of conquered that idea to see it as a new teaching for me and how to apply it really one time. So I think it's really been said you want to integrate everything, but my technique's to hone on the things that sound most wrong. And that's sort of like using the active and passive as opposed to just reading it and or drawing the graphic way is to put things on and say how do they fit into that graphic and learning that way. This is more of a logos approach. What doesn't fit, I'm going to integrate it that way.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. So yours is looks like yours is an analytical approach of saying what's wrong and then figuring out from there. That's okay.
The contrary attitude.
Yes. Yes. Next up is going to be Laura, followed by Mike Amori. Laura.
Okay. Well, I was a designer, I guess, for my whole career. So it spanned something like 30 years in higher education. And then I worked for an educational software company that utilized AI. And really, I mean, even my graduate degree is in curriculum design. And so this book, I feel like I've been a designer forever. It's in my blood, you know. And so when I read it, it doesn't feel anything different than I've known for years and have felt for years. And I agree there's a pitfall. You have to be idealistic to be a designer. You can't go into it without being idealistic. You can't be jaded. So in the fact that we know that maybe some of these things aren't going to work for us, that the design we make will fail, it's part of the, it's part of the game you have to play. You win by not succeeding, but what you have to be is staunch in your belief that sometime you're going to get there and you're going to get what you want. You have to do it that way. Otherwise, don't even bother. So
wonderful.
That's what I've learned. Okay.
Thank you, Laura. Next, what Laura is saying is be idealistic. Excellent. Next up is going to be Mike Amori, followed by Ambika. Mike.
Yeah, I'm taking Maritza's approach that I do take the authors that, on faith that we are designers. I feel that I'm a creative person. I still have a lot more that can come out of me. And I love this format. I feel like a kid in a candy store that I'm not pressed, even though the material is complex, but I've already found, tonight I was in the meetup room with Lori, who's an engineer. I didn't know Lori prior to the meetup room. And I get an opportunity, I'm looking at the author, I meet an engineer, and I can pick and choose, like Maritza said, just how much I want to take in. And if something is too complex or if I'm confused, I can just choose to walk away, or I can talk to anybody individually or collectively and take it on. So I've got a very kind of easy approach to this. It's a perfect format.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. I like your approach. Basically, what you're saying is that just the fact that we are learning this together, and there are so many people from so many different perspectives trying to do the same thing, that you can very easily pick up ideas from all these varied sources. Wonderful. So crowdsource. Okay, excellent. Next up is Ambika, followed by Mike, followed by Brian. Ambika, how are you planning to deal with this book?
This is really very, very exciting for me. It just feels I'm sort of stirring with excitement again. I love the opening sentence of the prelude. Genesis is ongoing. It is absolutely true. Every second we are creating something. Every second a thought leads to the next. So we're always in this process. And the other thing that I loved about this is being reminded that, yes, we are all creative. And that's been also what I've used in my classes. Every single person is creative. You're a poet, you don't have to write a poem to be a poet, and so on. So for me, it's really about bringing all this back together. And given this moment where I'm between one work and having quit, I'm packing. I don't know where I'm going. I'm still packing. My books are being packed, my paintings, and somehow it's going to come through. And in the middle of all this, I said, I've taken this on, but it's absolutely perfect because it's part of designing. It's a very self-reflexive process. being a designer and everything we do. And you showed your diagram in the beginning, Srikanth, with the 4 arrows, and instantly, this is what I did. And I don't know if you can see.
Yes.
And
Yep.
later I saw this lower line and I said, now that's got to change. This will become trees,
Mhm.
And so that's how I saw it intersecting with lots of spaces, spirals, because that's the stuff of the cosmos. So I call this freedom design. So, and yes, we are in 2 other classes, which requires reading. And so for me, it's all integrating and pulling apart, integrating and pulling apart. And then I thought of distractions, and I said, distractions can both deter and contribute. So I think it's this very holistic playtime for me to find my center as the center keeps changing, because everywhere is the center, So it is ongoing, and we are designers, and it's going to be playtime. And that made me think of Michael's class on the polymathy, that's just the way it is. Yeah.
Thank you.
This is beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambika. It's really amazing to see kind of different approaches, like the artistic approach, the engineer's approach, the mathematician's approach, and each of them is different. So you can see even here kind of the differences. Next up is going to be Mike, followed by Brian. Mike, how are you planning to master this book?
I like the answer to the previous question. This is kind of a hero's journey, modulated by Adler's book on how to read a book, modulated by the Bayesian thing that we had a presentation on, and I've done other work on, of how to solve multi-criteria objective functions in the face of conflicting requirements under uncertainty. I started my reading already, not with the chapter you told me to read, but with the acknowledgments. And so incorporated by reference is the entire system design methodology of DARPA and Carnegie Mellon University, in addition to the 280 pages of this book and the 500 or so pages of Mill Standard 489, plus a few more. So that's how to read the book.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mike. Next up is going to be Brian. Brian, go ahead.
So I think all of these different approaches really illustrates how this is a great format for addressing. I never would have imagined all these different approaches, and I never would be able to do them all myself. So I don't claim that I'm going to master the book. Maybe I'll try, but I'll get something out of it. And I'll mention mine because it's a little bit different. I have my own model I've developed that I think, and it's just called Sustainable Business Strategies, that I've mentioned before, taught in business schools, and it's gone well. So I'm going to use, I know that works in the world, if you will, and so I'm going to use that. And I hope this does seem like a very powerful tool. As illustrated, I think it really fleshes out the hero's journey, for example, or can be used to flesh out the hero's journey. And so I'm hoping that it'll help me even elucidate this model that I've developed in the past. And I'm really looking forward to that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. So I want to comment. Sorry, Marco. Marco, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sort of looking forward to the mental models, and also the way it's going to help me design my life. And so it's not only am I going to learn from reading the book and attending the meetups, but also being more an attentive observer of my thoughts as well.
Wonderful. What I want to do is that I want to pull this diagram up one more time to talk about the various approaches that people have talked about. There are people who have said, like Charlie or Evelyn, that focus on real life. So that is this part. make sure that all of it is concretized, make sure that all of it is real. And that is going to keep me grounded. There are people who have said the ideal part, believe, kind of focus on the ideal of what you're trying to achieve, have that optimism towards it, use that as an inspiration. There are people like David who have talked about the analytical part, that, try to see what is consistent, what is contradictory, put it together. There's people like Maritza who have talked about this, the green part, where you're saying, have confidence in yourself as the designer. So these are all kind of all amazing ways. And what is going to happen is that we are actually going to talk to each other while we do this. And we are going to learn so much from each other. And I want to tell you that on Thursdays, it's basically going to be open house, where we can talk about how we are approaching the book, what we are learning, what difficulties we are having, and work on all of that together. So on Mondays, we'll move the book forward. On Thursdays, it will be basically talking about how is it going? How are we seeing this? And all of that will filter back into how we are running these meetups, and we'll keep on improving and tweaking the design as we go on. So I am just tremendously grateful to see so many people from so many different, such varied backgrounds working on the same thing. I strongly believe that this is a universal issue. Like designing, I think we design. And from me, I got this first from Jacob Bronowski's Ascent of Man. And he looks at the history of man. That's what really characterizes us as human beings, being able to transform our lives, being able to project future, plan it, and make it happen, and keep doing that. So I think this is fantastic. So thank you very much, everybody. I want to tell you about some really, really exciting meetups that are coming up. There is a lady called Maxine from Philadelphia who has worked with actors like Marilyn Monroe, Frank Sinatra, people like that. And she has agreed to join our meetup on Wednesday, along with Mike, to talk about use of improvisation in life. How do you take the tools of improvisation and use it into life? So that is on Wednesdays. On Thursdays, of course, we are going to do these deep conversations on how we are shaping our design. On Saturday, I'm doing a meetup on Louis Sullivan. And this is probably the best meetup that I'm going to do on Louis Sullivan. It is the core of his philosophy. And it is actually very similar to what is there in this book, but it comes at it from a completely different angle. Louis Sullivan's expression is poetic, metaphorical, deeply spiritual, and moving. Compared to that, this presentation is far more kind of analytic, systematic, explicit, whereas his is more intuitive, implicit. But I think he's getting at the same thing. And I'm far more familiar with Louis Sullivan. So I'm going to try to formulate whatever I've said today in his words, which is his summary. There is a chapter called Face to Face in his autobiography, which is a summary of all his thought. So we are going to do that on Saturday. On Sunday, we are going to do this meetup. Mark Stallman is going to be here doing the meetup on the 4 causes and how to apply ideas of Marshall McLuhan to understanding technological change. It's very much relevant to what we are doing. Next Monday, we are going to be studying the chapter on the first chapter, the first part, that is the first tradition. So please read that for Monday, and look forward to seeing you then. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank
And
you, Scott.
Thank you, sure.
wonderful. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Good night. Good night.
Bye.
Good
Good
night.
night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night. Good night.